A quiet dinner turns into a storm of humiliation when a group of racist police officers target a respected black female judge at a high-end restaurant. What begins as a shocking display of prejudice quickly escalates into a fiery showdown. But this is no ordinary victim. As the judge decides to fight back, the officers are left reeling in the face of a reckoning they never saw coming. Don't forget to like and comment where you are from. A night to unwind. Judge Camille Robinson had spent the past week navigating high-profile legal discussions at an international conference in Geneva. It was an honor to be invited, a testament to her groundbreaking work on human rights and anti-discrimination policies. But after days filled with intense debates and formalities, she was ready for a quiet evening to herself. She chose La Belle Étoile, an upscale restaurant known for its exquisite cuisine and intimate ambiance. The warm golden lights and soft classical music provided the perfect backdrop to unwind. Camille, wearing an elegant black dress and a subtle silver necklace, blended effortlessly into the sophisticated crowd, yet she couldn't ignore the occasional curious glances her presence seemed to attract. Being one of the few black patrons in the room wasn't unusual for her. She had grown accustomed to it, but tonight she hoped to enjoy her solitude without interruption. As she perused the menu, a waiter approached with a polite smile. "Good evening, madam. May I recommend the chef's special tonight? The coq au vin is particularly delightful." Camille returned the smile. "That sounds wonderful. I'll have that, please, and a glass of your finest Merlot." The waiter nodded and disappeared into the bustling kitchen. Camille allowed herself a rare moment of peace, sipping water and reflecting on the progress made during the conference. However, her serenity was short-lived. The restaurant doors swung open with an authoritative force, drawing the attention of every diner. 3 uniformed police officers entered, their presence immediately altering the atmosphere. Their movements were deliberate as they scanned the room, their expressions cold and unyielding. Camille instinctively stiffened, her hand tightening around her glass. She'd seen this scene play out before, not in this exact setting, but in countless others, where power met prejudice. Still, she told herself to remain calm. Maybe they were here for something unrelated, but as they approached her table, her heart sank. The lead officer, a tall man with a sharp jawline and a condescending smirk, stopped directly in front of her. His name tag read, Sergeant LeBlanc. "Good evening, madam," he said, his tone devoid of warmth. "We've received a report of suspicious activity." Camille set her glass down, her expression calm but firm. "Suspicious activity? I'm afraid I don't understand." LeBlanc's eyes scanned her table, lingering on her briefcase and the leather folder containing her conference materials. "You're here alone?" "Yes, I am. Is there a problem with that?" The officer beside him, a younger man with a buzz cut, chimed in. "We need to see some identification, madam." Camille's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composure. "On what grounds?" "I'm simply having dinner." "Madam, it's a routine check," LeBlanc said, his smirk widening. "Surely you understand we're just doing our job." Camille stared at him for a moment before reaching into her bag. She pulled out her ID and handed it over, her movements deliberate. "Judge Camille Robinson, United States Circuit Court. I'm here attending an international legal conference." LeBlanc's smirk faltered, but only briefly. He handed the ID back without acknowledgement. "A judge, huh? Impressive. But even judges aren't above scrutiny." The comment was meant to provoke, and Camille knew it. She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Officers, I respect the work you do, but if you have no legitimate reason to question me, I'd like to continue my evening." The restaurant had gone eerily quiet. Diners whispered among themselves, their curiosity and discomfort palpable. The waiter who had served Camille stood frozen near the kitchen, his face a mix of concern and confusion. LeBlanc leaned closer, his voice low but menacing. "Listen, Judge Robinson. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." Camille's gaze hardened. Slowly, she reached into her bag again. Not for her ID this time, but for something far more decisive. She placed her U.S. federal judge badge on the table, its gold surface gleaming under the chandelier light. Next to it, she set down her concealed carry permit and the sleek black pistol she carried discreetly for personal protection. The gesture was calculated, not aggressive, but it sent an unmistakable message. Camille met Leblanc's eyes, her voice steady and cold. "This is how I ensure my safety. Now, officers, I suggest you reconsider your approach." Gasps rippled through the restaurant as the officers stared at the badge and weapon, their bravado visibly shaken. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Leblanc for direction. But Leblanc's ego wouldn't let him back down so easily. "We'll be watching you, Judge," he said, his tone venomous. "Enjoy your meal." The officers turned and left, their exit as abrupt as their arrival. The room remained silent for several moments before the buzz of conversation returned, louder and more charged than before. Camille exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the gun and badge back in her bag. The waiter approached cautiously. "Madam, are you all right?" Camille nodded, offering a faint smile. "Thank you. Could you bring my check, please?" "Of course, madam." As Camille prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her chest. The confrontation might have ended, but something told her the night was far from over. The trap is set. Camille Robinson left La Belle Étoile with her head held high, but her mind raced. The blatant hostility she had faced from the officers wasn't new, but it was a reminder of how easily authority could be weaponized against someone like her. She walked briskly to her rental car, parked a few streets away, her heels clicking sharply against the cobblestones. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint aroma of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery. Camille took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within. As she approached her car, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her hand instinctively rested on her bag, where her firearm was stored. She scanned her surroundings. The narrow street was mostly empty, save for the occasional passerby. She unlocked her car and slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors immediately. The faint glow of the dashboard lit her face as she started the engine. As she drove through the quiet streets of Geneva, the tension in her chest began to ease. She focused on the road, her thoughts shifting to her early flight the next morning. "Just one more night," she told herself, "then I can put this behind me." But Camille's peace was short-lived. As she turned onto a secluded stretch of road leading to her hotel, the faint glare of headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought nothing of it, but the car didn't pass her. Instead, it maintained a steady distance, its lights unwavering. Her pulse quickened. Camille adjusted her rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the vehicle. It was a dark SUV, its windows tinted. "Coincidence," she muttered, trying to dismiss the growing unease. She decided to test her theory. At the next intersection, she turned left instead of continuing straight toward her hotel. The SUV followed. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. She made another turn, then another, weaving through the quiet streets in an attempt to lose her pursuer. But the SUV remained on her tail, its presence growing more menacing with each passing second. Camille's mind raced. "They're trying to intimidate me." She considered calling the police, but dismissed the idea almost immediately. The very officers who had harassed her earlier were unlikely to help now. Instead, she focused on staying calm and thinking strategically. She spotted a small gas station ahead, its fluorescent lights flickering in the night. Pulling into the station, she parked near the entrance and stepped out of the car, her phone in hand. The SUV slowed as it passed, but didn't stop. Camille pretended to make a call, watching as the vehicle disappeared down the road. She exhaled, her heart pounding. Maybe that's the end of it, she thought. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Unbeknownst to Camille, the officers from the restaurant had regrouped. Sergeant Leblanc sat in the driver's seat of the same SUV that had been tailing her, his jaw clenched in frustration. "She thinks she's untouchable," Leblanc spat, gripping the steering wheel tightly, "flashing her badge and gun like she's above us." One of the other officers, a wiry man named Claude, laughed nervously. "She made you look weak, boss, in front of all those people." Leblanc's eyes narrowed. "Exactly, and we can't let that stand. If she thinks she can humiliate us and walk away, she's got another thing coming." The third officer, a burly man named Martin, shifted uncomfortably in the back seat. "We're not seriously going after her, are we? She's a judge, for God's sake." Leblanc turned to face him, his expression cold. "Are you scared, Martin? Because if you are, you can get out right now." Martin hesitated, then shook his head. "I'm not scared. I just don't want this blowing back on us." "It won't," LeBlanc said, his voice dripping with confidence. "We'll handle this carefully. No witnesses, no evidence. She won't even see it coming." The officers began to lay out their plan, their words laced with malice. LeBlanc's ego, bruised from their earlier encounter, drove him to seek revenge. He was determined to show Camille that her badge and title meant nothing in the face of his power. Camille arrived at her hotel, a modest but comfortable establishment tucked away in a quiet part of the city. She parked her car and walked briskly to the entrance, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of the SUV. The concierge greeted her warmly, and she managed a polite smile before heading to her room. Once inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, her body trembling with adrenaline. She set her bag on the table and took out her firearm, checking the magazine. The cold weight of the weapon in her hand brought her a small measure of comfort. Camille sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the darkened street below. Her mind replayed the events of the evening, the officer's hostility, the ominous SUV, the sense of being hunted. She felt a surge of anger rising within her. "They think they can intimidate me," she thought. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from a colleague at the conference, checking in to see if she had made it back safely. Camille replied briefly, assuring them she was fine, though her unease lingered. Outside, the dark SUV idled a block away, its occupants watching and waiting. Inside, LeBlanc smirked. She won't know what hit her. The ambush. The silence of the night was deceptive. Camille Robinson, a woman used to reading between the lines, felt the weight of impending danger pressing on her chest like a vice. Sleep wouldn't come. She sat by the window, the city's faint glow casting shadows across her face, her firearm resting on the table nearby. The dark SUV had vanished, but she couldn't shake the image of its headlights in her rearview mirror. Something told her she hadn't seen the last of them. LeBlanc, Claude and Martin waited until the lights in Camille's hotel room went dark. They were parked just out of sight, their vehicle blending into the shadows of a quiet street. LeBlanc tapped his fingers on the dashboard, his mind calculating every step of their plan. "She'll leave early," LeBlanc said, his tone dripping with malice. "Judges don't sleep in. We'll catch her in transit. Quick and clean." Martin, sitting in the back seat, shifted uncomfortably. "Are we sure about this? What if she's armed?" LeBlanc scoffed. "She's not a threat. Once we isolate her, she'll comply. They always do." Camille woke before dawn, her internal clock conditioned by years of early court sessions and long days. The air felt heavy, her intuition prickling like a warning siren she couldn't ignore. She dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, practical and unassuming, and packed her belongings efficiently. As she checked out, the concierge greeted her with a warm smile. "Safe travels, Judge Robinson." She nodded politely, her mind elsewhere. The sun was just beginning to rise, the city bathed in soft golden hues. Camille loaded her bags into her rental car, glancing over her shoulder at the quiet street. It was empty, but she felt eyes on her. She hadn't driven more than 5 minutes when she noticed it again, the same dark SUV. Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained calm. Camille wasn't someone easily rattled, even in the face of danger. The SUV followed her at a steady distance, keeping pace with her every turn. Camille's sharp mind quickly assessed her options. The streets were unfamiliar, and she didn't know the area well enough to lose them in a chase. She needed a plan, and fast. As she approached an intersection, the SUV suddenly sped up, overtaking her and swerving into her lane. Camille slammed on the brakes, her car screeching to a halt. The SUV blocked her path, its doors flung open as LeBlanc and his men stepped out. Camille's hand went to her bag, gripping the firearm hidden inside. She cracked the window slightly, her voice steady as she called out, "What's the meaning of this?" LeBlanc approached with a smug grin, his hands resting casually on his belt. "Good morning, Your Honor. We couldn't let you leave without a proper farewell." "Step away from the car," Camille demanded, her tone cold. "Oh, we're not here to hurt you," LeBlanc lied, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "We just want to talk." Claude and Martin flanked the car, their faces hard with intimidation. Camille's heart raced, but outwardly she was composed. She unlocked her door and stepped out slowly, keeping her firearm concealed. Standing tall, Camille faced the three officers with an air of authority that made even LeBlanc falter for a moment. "You're out of your jurisdiction," Camille said sharply. "If you think this intimidation tactic will work, you're sorely mistaken." LeBlanc stepped closer, invading her space. "Jurisdiction doesn't matter when it's personal. You embarrassed us last night, made us look like fools." "That was your doing, not mine," Camille shot back. Her hand moved subtly toward her bag, ready to act if necessary. The tension was thick. Camille knew the situation could escalate at any moment, but she also knew how to command the room, or the street in this case. She reached into her bag deliberately, pulling out her badge and firearm in one swift motion. Placing both on the roof of her car, she stared them down. "I am a federal judge," she declared, her voice steady and authoritative. "And I will not be threatened by a group of rogue officers." LeBlanc's smirk faded. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes, but his bruised ego quickly overtook his better judgment. "You think that badge protects you out here?" he sneered. "We could make you disappear and no one would question it." Camille didn't flinch. "You won't get the chance. Walk away now, and I won't report this. Push me, and I'll make sure you lose everything." LeBlanc hesitated, the weight of her words hanging in the air. His colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control. Camille saw her opening and seized it. "Leave," she said firmly, "before this gets worse for you." With a sharp motion, she holstered her firearm, grabbed her badge, and stepped back into her car. The officers moved reluctantly, their plan unraveling before their eyes. Camille drove off, her heart pounding as adrenaline coursed through her veins. But as she disappeared into the distance, LeBlanc's fury boiled over. "This isn't over," he growled. "We'll make her pay." Claude and Martin exchanged wary looks, but didn't protest. They knew better than to challenge LeBlanc when he was in this state. Back in the SUV, LeBlanc laid out his next move. "She thinks she's won," he spat, "but she has no idea what we're capable of." "Boss," Martin said cautiously, "maybe we should let this go. She's a judge. If she reports us—" "She won't report us," LeBlanc snapped. "Not if we get to her first." Claude's voice was hesitant. "What's the plan?" LeBlanc's eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity. "We wait until she's alone. Then we make sure she learns who's really in charge." The trap was set, and Camille's fight was far from over. The hunt. Camille drove with a heightened sense of awareness, every nerve on edge. The winding countryside roads outside the city offered no comfort. They felt like a labyrinth designed to corner her. She had handled countless adversarial situations in court, but this was different. This was survival. Her mind replayed the encounter with the officers. The fire in their eyes was unmistakable. They wouldn't let this go. She needed a plan, one that would put her out of their reach and expose their actions. Camille's car slowed as she approached a modest bed and breakfast nestled at the edge of a quiet village. The rustic inn was surrounded by dense trees, providing a sense of seclusion. She parked and stepped inside, the creak of the wooden floorboards beneath her feet amplifying her unease. The innkeeper, a kind-looking older woman, greeted her warmly. "Welcome, dear. Traveling alone?" "Yes," Camille replied, her tone guarded. "Just passing through. I'll need a room for the night." The woman handed over a key. "Room 3. It's cozy and quiet. Let me know if you need anything." Camille nodded, offering a polite smile before retreating to her room. She locked the door and drew the curtains, ensuring she couldn't be seen from outside. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, a missed call from her colleague, Judge Elena Martinez. She dialed back immediately. "Elena, it's me." "Camille, I've been worried. Are you okay?" Elena's voice was laced with concern. "I'm fine, but I need your help," Camille said, lowering her voice. She recounted the events of the last 24 hours, leaving nothing out. "I don't know how far they're willing to go, but I can't take chances." Elena's tone hardened. "This is serious. You need to report them." "I will," Camille said, but I need to stay ahead of them. If they find me before I gather enough evidence—" "You're not alone in this," Elena assured her. "I'll contact some people I trust in the international circuit. Keep your location secure and call me if anything changes." As the call ended, Camille felt a flicker of relief. Having Elena on her side was a lifeline, but the threat still loomed large. Back in the city, LeBlanc was on the move. He leaned against the hood of the SUV, phone pressed to his ear, his voice cold and calculated. "She's headed south. We've tracked her credit card to a rental car agency. Keep monitoring." Claude, leaning against the driver's door, frowned. "She's smart. She'll have a backup plan." LeBlanc sneered. "Doesn't matter. She's not as untouchable as she thinks. Once we find her, we'll make her regret crossing us." Martin, sitting inside the SUV, tapped nervously on the dashboard. "This is getting out of hand, boss. She's a judge. What if this blows back on us?" "It won't," LeBlanc snapped. "We control the narrative. By the time anyone figures out what happened, it'll be too late." The three officers climbed into the SUV, their sights set on Camille. They had the advantage of manpower and resources, but Camille had one weapon they underestimated: her resolve. That night, Camille sat by the window of her room, staring out at the dark forest beyond the inn. The sound of distant rustling in the trees kept her on edge. She gripped her firearm, placing it within reach on the bedside table. Suddenly, headlights pierced through the darkness, bouncing off the trees as a vehicle approached the inn. Camille's stomach dropped. She peered through the curtains, her heart pounding as she recognized the dark SUV. The vehicle parked, and the engine cut off. Camille crouched low, her mind racing. They had found her. Her phone buzzed. It was Elena again. Camille answered in a whisper. "They're here." "What? Where are you?" Elena asked, her voice panicked. "A bed and breakfast in a small village," Camille replied. "I don't know how they tracked me, but I need to move now." Elena's tone shifted to urgency. "Stay calm. Is there another way out?" Camille scanned the room and spotted a window at the back. "Yes, but I'll need to be quick." "Then go," Elena urged. "I'll keep tracking their movements. Call me when you're safe." Camille hung up and grabbed her bag, ensuring her badge, firearm, and phone were secured. She slid open the window and climbed out silently, her feet landing softly on the ground below. Staying low, she crept toward the tree line. Inside the SUV, LeBlanc's phone buzzed with a notification. A faint smile spread across his face. "She's still here." Claude and Martin exchanged uneasy glances. "You sure about this, boss?" Martin asked. "Positive," LeBlanc replied, stepping out of the vehicle. "Let's pay her a visit." As they approached the inn, LeBlanc noticed the dim light in one of the rooms and gestured for Claude to check it out. Meanwhile, Martin circled the building, scanning for any signs of movement. Camille crouched behind a cluster of trees, her breath shallow. She could see LeBlanc and Claude entering the inn, their flashlights cutting through the darkened hallway. She knew her window of escape was closing fast. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. Camille spun around, her firearm drawn as Martin emerged from the shadows. His expression shifted from surprise to panic as Camille aimed directly at him. "Don't move," she commanded, her voice firm. Martin hesitated, his hands raising slightly. "Look, I don't want trouble." "Then drop your weapon," Camille interrupted. "Now." Martin complied, his firearm falling to the ground. Camille kept her aim steady, backing away toward the road. She knew she couldn't stay here, but the odds of getting past LeBlanc and Claude were slim. As Martin lowered himself to the ground, Camille grabbed his radio and tossed it into the woods. "Tell them I'm gone," she ordered, "and don't follow me." Before Martin could respond, Camille disappeared into the shadows. By the time LeBlanc and Claude returned to the SUV, Camille was long gone. They found Martin sitting on the ground, his weapon missing and his face pale. "What happened?" LeBlanc demanded. "She got the drop on me," Martin admitted, his voice shaky. "She's gone." LeBlanc's fury boiled over. "You let her escape?" "She's smart," Claude muttered. "We underestimated her." LeBlanc slammed the SUV's hood with his fist. "No more games. We find her and this ends." But Camille was already several miles away, blending into the darkness with her relentless determination driving her forward. The officers had the resources, but Camille had something more powerful, an unshakable will to survive and fight back. The web of traps. The forest was a labyrinth of darkness and sound, but Camille moved with purpose. Her instincts, honed through years of legal battles and calculated decisions, guided her steps. Every twig snap, every rustle of leaves sharpened her focus. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the urgency of escape, but her mind stayed razor-sharp. Camille emerged onto a gravel road, her silhouette faintly illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the dense canopy. In the distance, the faint hum of an engine echoed, a possible threat. She pressed herself against a tree, her fingers gripping her firearm tightly. She needed a new plan. The officers had resources, connections, and a bruised ego driving them, but Camille had one significant advantage, her ability to think several steps ahead. Reaching into her bag, she pulled out a folded map she had taken from the bed and breakfast's reception desk. It detailed the local terrain, marking trails, villages, and potential exits. Her eyes locked onto a small town approximately 5 miles away. She estimated it would take her a few hours to reach it on foot, but it was her best chance to create distance between herself and her pursuers. Camille set off down the road, her strides purposeful. Along the way, she discarded anything that could be traced. A hotel receipt, a credit card receipt stub. She knew the officers would comb through every lead, and she wasn't about to make it easy for them. Back at their SUV, LeBlanc's frustration had reached its boiling point. He paced in tight circles, barking orders into his radio. Check every road out of this village. No one comes or goes without clearance. I want eyes on every car, every pedestrian. Claude, sitting on the SUV's hood, watched his leader with a mix of irritation and skepticism. She's not going to walk onto a main road with us looking for her. LeBlanc rounded on him. Then find the back roads, check the woods, the trails, anything. Martin remained silent, still shaken from his earlier encounter with Camille. His mind replayed the moment she disarmed him, her calm demeanor unsettlingly resolute. What about the locals? Martin asked hesitantly. If she's smart, she'll blend in, maybe hide in plain sight. LeBlanc narrowed his eyes. Then we make it clear she's not welcome. Put the word out. She's dangerous. If anyone spots her, they report it immediately. As the first hints of dawn broke over the horizon, Camille arrived at the outskirts of the small town she had spotted on the map. The streets were quiet, the early hour ensuring most of the residents were still asleep. She found an empty bench near a fountain in the town square and sat down, her legs aching from the trek. A few minutes later, an older man with a weathered face and a kind smile approached, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. His clothes suggested he was a baker starting his morning deliveries. "Are you lost, madame?" he asked in French, his voice gentle. Camille hesitated, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. "Yes, I've been traveling, but I ran into some trouble." The man studied her face, noting the fatigue and tension etched into her features. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No," Camille admitted. "I'm just passing through." He placed a loaf of bread beside her. "You look like you could use some food. No charge." Camille's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Thank you, that's very kind." The man tipped his hat. "If you need a place to rest, my bakery has a small storeroom. It's not much, but it's safe." Camille's instincts told her to decline, but her exhaustion and the sincerity in his eyes swayed her. "I might take you up on that," she said cautiously. LeBlanc's team arrived in the small town a few hours later, their SUV drawing the attention of curious locals. The officers stepped out, their uniforms and cold stares creating an immediate air of unease. LeBlanc approached a group of townsfolk gathered near the square. "We're looking for someone," he said, holding up a photo of Camille taken from her identification records. "She's dangerous. If you see her, notify us immediately." The villagers exchanged nervous glances, their reluctance to interact with the officers palpable. One woman, bold enough to speak, crossed her arms. "This town doesn't take kindly to troublemakers." Claude stepped forward, his tone dripping with faux politeness. "We're only here to ensure everyone's safety. Help us and we'll be gone quickly." The villagers said nothing more, but their expressions made it clear they wouldn't be offering assistance. In the bakery's storeroom, Camille sat on a crate, nibbling on the bread the baker had given her. Her phone vibrated. Elena was calling. "I've been tracking their movements," Elena said urgently. "They've made it to the town you're in. You need to move." Camille's stomach tightened. "I can't keep running without a plan. There's only so far I can go." "I'm working on something," Elena assured her. "Just stay out of sight." Before Camille could respond, she heard voices outside the bakery. She peeked through a small window and saw LeBlanc and Claude questioning the baker. Her heart raced as she watched him shake his head, gesturing toward the town square. "They're getting closer," Camille whispered into the phone. "Then it's time to change the game," Elena replied. "Do you have anything on you that can tie them to what they did? Something to expose them?" Camille's hand brushed against her badge, still in her bag. "I have enough to start." "Good," Elena said. "Use it. They want you cornered. Make them the hunted." Camille ended the call, her resolve hardening. The time for running was over. She was done playing defense. That night, Camille moved silently through the town, using the shadows to her advantage. She left subtle clues: a discarded scarf near an alley, footprints leading toward the outskirts, designed to draw the officers away from the villagers and into a more isolated area. As she positioned herself near an abandoned mill, her thoughts turned to what lay ahead. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about justice. The officers had no idea they were walking into her carefully laid trap. By dawn, the game would change, and Camille would ensure they finally faced the consequences of their actions. Turning the tables, the first light of dawn revealed the silent and eerie ambience of the abandoned mill on the outskirts of town. The air was heavy, laden with tension, as if the environment itself was bracing for the inevitable confrontation. Camille waited in the shadows, her mind calculating every possible move her pursuers could make. She was no longer running. She was prepared to confront them head-on. LeBlanc's team was closing in, guided by the trail Camille had deliberately left behind. The discarded scarf, the faint footprints, each clue led them deeper into the outskirts, away from the protective eyes of the townsfolk. "This doesn't feel right," Claude muttered, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "It's too easy." "Easy or not, we're finishing this," LeBlanc snapped, his eyes scanning the horizon. "She's one woman. We're a trained team. Let's move." Martin hesitated, his nerves clearly frayed. "We've underestimated her before. Maybe we should regroup." LeBlanc glared at him. "If you're scared, stay behind. The rest of us have a job to do." Martin fell silent, but the unease in his expression remained. From her position in the mill's loft, Camille had a clear vantage point of the surrounding area. Through a crack in the wooden planks, she spotted the officers approaching, their movements cautious but determined. Her mind raced as she finalized her plan. She had positioned several distractions around the area, carefully placed debris, loose floorboards, and objects that could create noise if disturbed. It wasn't much, but it would buy her precious seconds to outmaneuver them. Reaching into her bag, Camille pulled out her badge and placed it on a table near the center of the mill. It was a calculated move, a symbol of her authority and a lure to draw them in. The officers entered the mill, their flashlights cutting through the dim interior. The creaking floorboards echoed with each step, heightening the tension. LeBlanc's voice broke the silence. "Come out, Judge," he called mockingly. "You've had your fun, but it's over now. There's nowhere left to run." Camille's voice echoed from above, calm and resolute. "I'm not running, LeBlanc. I've never run from cowards like you." The insult hit its mark. LeBlanc's face twisted with anger as he signaled for his team to spread out. "Search every corner," he ordered. "Find her." As the officers moved, the carefully placed distractions came into play. A sudden clatter of falling metal pipes drew their attention to one corner, while a rustling sound from above sent their flashlights scanning the loft. Camille used the chaos to her advantage, descending silently from the loft and positioning herself near the exit. She watched as the officers became increasingly disoriented, their frustration mounting. Camille stepped into the open, her presence startling the officers. Her weapon was drawn, her stance steady and commanding. "Drop your weapons," she ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years commanding courtrooms. The officers froze, their shock quickly turning to defiance. LeBlanc smirked, raising his hands mockingly. "You think you can take all of us, Judge?" "I don't need to," Camille replied, her eyes locking onto his. "This isn't about force, it's about justice." She gestured to a small device clipped to her belt. A red light blinked steadily, a live recording. "You're being watched," Camille continued. "Every word, every action, it's all being broadcast." LeBlanc's confidence faltered. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Camille said coolly. "The world is already watching." "How do you think your careers will fare when they see what you've done?" Claude glanced at Martin, uncertainty etched into his features. "We didn't sign up for this," he muttered under his breath. "This wasn't supposed to go this far." Martin, his hands trembling, took a step back. "She's right, we're already in too deep. I'm not risking my life for your vendetta, LeBlanc." LeBlanc's fury erupted. "Cowards! She's the criminal here, not us." But the cracks in his authority were evident. The team's unity had fractured, and Camille capitalized on the moment. "You still have a choice," she said, addressing the officers directly. "Walk away now, and I'll ensure your names are cleared. Stay, and you'll face the full weight of the law." The tension reached its breaking point when LeBlanc, unable to accept defeat, lunged toward Camille. She sidestepped expertly, her training kicking in. In the scuffle, her weapon discharged, the sound deafening in the confined space. The shot grazed LeBlanc's arm, and he cried out in pain, stumbling backward. Camille kept her weapon trained on him, her expression unreadable. "This ends now," she said firmly. "You've lost." LeBlanc clutched his arm, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll regret this." Camille didn't waver. "The only regret here is yours." As the officers scrambled to recover, Camille seized the opportunity to retreat. She moved swiftly, disappearing into the surrounding woods before they could regroup. By the time they realized she was gone, the first rays of sunlight were breaking over the horizon, casting the mill in a pale glow. LeBlanc, clutching his injured arm, glared at the empty space where Camille had stood. "She can't get far," he growled. "We'll find her." But even he knew the truth. Camille had outmaneuvered them again, and their grip on the situation was slipping. Miles away, Camille paused to catch her breath, her mind already strategizing her next move. She knew the fight wasn't over, but she also knew she had the upper hand. The recording device, clipped to her belt, contained everything she needed to expose the officers and ensure they faced justice. "Eleanor," she whispered into her phone, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "It's time to go public." The tides turned, the morning sun had barely risen, when the fallout from Camille's escape began to ripple across the region. In her hotel room, miles away from the abandoned mill, Camille sat at a small desk, her laptop open and her phone buzzing with activity. The video she had recorded during the confrontation was now in the hands of trusted allies, and its contents were already beginning to circulate among influential figures. The video footage revealed not just the officers' aggression, but their blatant disregard for justice. Camille had ensured that every word and action they took inside the mill was documented, including LeBlanc's threats and the other officers' growing dissent. Elena's voice came through on the call. "It's out there now, Camille. We've sent the footage to the media, legal organizations, and some high-profile activists. The narrative is already shifting." Camille exhaled, her resolve firm. "Good. Let the truth speak for itself." The response was swift. Social media erupted with outrage as the video gained traction, hashtags demanding accountability trending globally. News outlets picked up the story, airing clips of the confrontation alongside Camille's professional background, emphasizing her role as a judge and an advocate for justice. At the precinct, LeBlanc sat in the captain's office, his injured arm bandaged but his fury unbridled. The captain's expression was grim as he watched the video playing on his desktop screen. "What the hell were you thinking, LeBlanc?" the captain barked. "This isn't just misconduct. It's a public relations disaster." LeBlanc bristled. "She's manipulating the narrative. She set us up." The captain slammed his hand on the desk. "It doesn't matter. The evidence is damning, and now the entire world is watching. We've got reporters outside demanding answers, and the mayor is breathing down my neck." Claude and Martin, standing in the corner, exchanged uneasy glances. The guilt and fear etched into their faces were undeniable. "Captain," Martin ventured cautiously, "we didn't sign up for this. We didn't know LeBlanc was going to take things this far." LeBlanc spun around, his eyes blazing. "You're going to pin this on me." Claude stepped forward, his voice firm but trembling. "You crossed the line, LeBlanc. We followed you out of loyalty, but this isn't defensible." The captain cut through their argument. "Enough. Internal affairs is already involved. Until further notice, you're all suspended." Camille knew that while the public backlash was a victory, it was only the first step. She needed to ensure that the case didn't fade into the background once the media cycle moved on. She reached out to a trusted contact in the European judiciary system, a renowned prosecutor named Anton Leclerc. Anton's voice was warm but serious when he answered. "Camille, I've seen the footage. It's horrifying." "That's why I need your help," Camille said. "This isn't just about me. This is about systemic abuse. They need to be held accountable." "I'll do everything in my power," Anton assured her. "With the evidence you've provided, we can ensure this reaches the highest legal authorities." Meanwhile, LeBlanc was spiraling. The suspension, the public condemnation, and his colleagues turning against him had shattered his facade of control. But his rage was focused on one target, Camille. "She thinks she can destroy me?" LeBlanc growled, pacing in his apartment. "She doesn't know who she's messing with." He reached out to a contact in the criminal underworld, a man known for handling problems discreetly. "I need her silenced," LeBlanc said, his voice low and venomous. The man on the other end chuckled. "You're asking for a lot, LeBlanc. This kind of thing doesn't come cheap." "Whatever it costs," LeBlanc snapped. "Just make it happen." Camille wasn't unaware of the danger she faced. She had already changed locations twice, staying ahead of any attempts to track her down. But she also knew she couldn't hide forever. To truly win, she had to face the storm head-on. While staying at a safe house provided by Elena's network, Camille received an encrypted message from an unknown number. It read, "Stay hidden. They're coming for you." Camille's jaw tightened. She replied, "Who is this?" The response was immediate. "A friend. Watch your back." Though the warning was cryptic, it confirmed her suspicions. LeBlanc wasn't going to back down. She began preparing for the inevitable, reinforcing the safe house's security and mapping out escape routes. That night, the streets outside the safe house were eerily quiet. Camille, seated by the window, watched for any sign of movement. Her weapon was within arm's reach, and her mind was sharp with focus. Around midnight, a faint sound caught her attention, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. She turned off the lights, plunging the room into darkness, and moved silently to the door. Through the peephole, she spotted two men approaching, their movements deliberate. One of them carried a crowbar while the other appeared to be armed. Camille's pulse quickened, but her resolve remained unshaken. She positioned herself strategically, waiting for the right moment. The men forced the door open, stepping cautiously inside. The dim moonlight revealed their silhouettes as they scanned the room. "Find her," one of them whispered. Camille emerged from the shadows, her weapon aimed steadily. "Looking for me?" The men froze, startled by her calm and commanding presence. "Drop your weapons," Camille ordered. "Now." One of them hesitated, his hand twitching toward his gun. Camille fired a warning shot, the sound echoing through the room. "I said drop them," she barked. This time they complied, their weapons clattering to the floor. "Get out," Camille said coldly, "and tell your boss he's next if he doesn't stop." The men scrambled to leave, their fear palpable. As they disappeared into the night, Camille closed the door, her heart pounding but her resolve stronger than ever. The attempted attack only fueled Camille's determination. She contacted Anton and Elena, outlining her next steps. "It's time to take this to the courtroom," she said. "No more hiding, no more running." The wheels of justice were set in motion, and Camille knew she was ready to face whatever came next. A fierce verdict. Days after the attempted attack on Camille, the world watched as the case unfolded in a packed courtroom in Geneva. The prosecution, led by Anton Leclerc, presented irrefutable evidence of the officer's abuse of power, the illegal targeting of Camille, and the attempted cover-up orchestrated by Leblanc. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the footage Camille had recorded was played for the jury. The images of the officer's arrogance and cruelty left the room in stunned silence. Camille, sitting confidently at the witness stand, recounted the events with unwavering composure. "I am a judge," Camille said, her voice steady. "My duty is to uphold justice. What happened to me wasn't just a personal attack. It was an attack on the very principles that protect us all. This case is bigger than me. It's about ensuring no one, regardless of race or status, is subjected to the injustice I faced." The crowd in the courtroom erupted into applause, despite the judge's call for order. Camille's words struck a chord that resonated far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Leblanc's defense team attempted to paint Camille as combative and manipulative, but their arguments fell apart under scrutiny. Claude and Martin, the two junior officers who had reluctantly followed Leblanc's orders, turned on their superior. Their testimony detailed Leblanc's escalating aggression and the toxic culture of racism he fostered within their ranks. "I regret not standing up to him," Martin confessed, his voice trembling. "But I won't stay silent any longer." The judge overseeing the trial commended their honesty, but made it clear that their complicity carried consequences. Leblanc, however, showed no remorse. His arrogance and attempts to justify his actions only solidified the case against him. As the trial reached its climax, the world watched with bated breath. News outlets from across the globe covered the case, with headlines like "Black Judge Takes on Corruption and Racism in Europe" dominating the news cycle. Social media exploded with support for Camille, with millions rallying behind the hashtags #Justice for Camille and #Stand for Justice. In a surprise move, Camille addressed the public outside the courthouse during the trial's final week. Standing before a sea of reporters and supporters, she spoke with clarity and passion. "This isn't about one bad officer," Camille said. "This is about dismantling systems of power that allow such individuals to thrive. Real change starts when we hold those systems accountable." Her speech was met with thunderous applause, the moment immortalized as a rallying cry for justice worldwide. On the final day of the trial, the courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the verdict. Leblanc was found guilty on multiple charges, including abuse of power, racial discrimination, and conspiracy to harm a public official. The other officers received lesser sentences for their roles in the incident, but were mandated to participate in restorative justice programs and anti-discrimination training. As the verdict was read, Camille sat quietly, her face betraying no emotion. But when the gavel struck, she allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. Outside the courthouse, a massive crowd erupted in cheers. Supporters waved signs that read, "Justice wins" and "Equality for all." Camille stepped out to address them, flanked by Anton and Elena. "This isn't the end," Camille said, her voice strong. "It's the beginning of a movement. Justice isn't just a courtroom victory. It's the work we do every day to create a fairer, kinder world. And I promise you I will keep fighting." In the weeks following the trial, Camille returned to her work, her reputation elevated to a global symbol of justice and resilience. Invitations poured in for her to speak at conferences, legal summits, and universities. She used every platform to advocate for reforms in law enforcement and judicial systems. Elena and Anton joined her in founding the Justice Initiative, a non-profit organization dedicated to fighting racial injustice and corruption worldwide. The initiative quickly gained traction, backed by public figures and everyday citizens inspired by Camille's story. Leblanc's fall from grace became a cautionary tale for those who abused power, and the police force he once commanded underwent sweeping reforms. Training programs were overhauled, and new leadership committed to transparency and fairness was appointed. As Camille's journey inspired change, her story resonated deeply with those who followed it. Her message was clear. One voice, when raised with courage, could ignite a global movement. To those who stayed until the end of this powerful story, thank you. Your support fuels the mission of amplifying voices that challenge the status quo. What would you have done in Camille's place? Could you have stood firm against such adversity? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your perspective. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Together we can create a community that values justice, equality, and the courage to fight for what's right.